There will be times when the struggle seems impossible. I know this already. Alone, unsure, dwarfed by the scale of the enemy. Remember this. Freedom is a pure idea. It occurs spontaneously and without instruction. Random acts of insurrection are occurring constantly throughout the galaxy. There are whole armies, battalions that have no idea that they've already enlisted in the cause. Remember that the frontier of the rebellion is everywhere. And even the smallest act of insurrection pushes our lines forward. And then remember this. The Imperial need for control is so desperate because it is so unnatural. Tyranny requires constant effort. It breaks. It leaks. Authority is brittle. Oppression is the mask of fear. Remember that. And know this. The day will come when all these skirmishes and battles, these moments of defiance will have flooded the banks of the Empire's authority. And then there will be one too many. One single thing will break the siege. Remember this. Try.
Welcome to Prolespod.
Hello and welcome to Prolespod, your bi-weekly dose of history, politics, and culture without the liberalism. You can find and follow us on most social media platforms at Prolespod, and on TikTok at proles.pod. If you want to help us reach more people, leaving 5-star reviews on any of the various podcast catchers is the best way to do that. If you want to help us with our vision, you can subscribe to our Patreon over at patreon.com/Prolespod. There's a lot of great stuff there, such as early access to main feed episodes, bonus episodes, theory beats, study guides, raffles, surprise drops, and more, with more on the way. Also, some good news. We will now be doing monthly Vanguard drawings for a Proles pack. This will be a mystery box of sorts that will include a postcard from us, some random communist pins, a random coffee table or history book, and I should clarify there, a coffee table book, not a coffee table, and a very limited run merch item that we've designed ourselves. We'll announce the monthly winner in an episode, as well as share a cheeky picture of the box on our Patreon. These Proles packs will also be given out as rewards for future contests, so keep an eye out for those. This episode is brought to you by the campaign to make Star Wars apolitical again. Today, we're going to be talking about the benefits and limitations of Andor and other anti-capitalist media, specifically the sci-fi franchises of Hunger Games and Severance. But first, who do we have with us today?
Hi, it's Justin. Nice to meet you all.
I'm still Ray, and I'm still here.
And I'm your host, Tony. So before we delve into the first franchise, I guess, of anti-capitalist media we'd like to examine for its merits, for its pitfalls, does anyone have any thoughts to share, kind of preliminary thoughts about capitalist media in general?
It is entertainment, even if it is like anti-capitalist. It's not as though anti-capitalist media is going to inspire the revolution or give us the tools we need or any of that sort of stuff. It is still designed to make money for capitalist entities, whether that be, corporations or individuals or publishing houses or whatever it is. There's not really any point to it beyond that. most people, the messaging is going to go over their head, or they're going to assign whatever rebellion they imagine in their head is what they want the future to look like, even
Never
if
Trump.
yes, the resistance. And there are reasons for that. We'll get into the details as we go on, I think, but yeah, that's kind of my take. Ray, did you have something to add?
I think a lot, okay, this is going to sound crazy, but I think a lot about like the reality that like Marx himself was not able to examine Marxist sources, right? Like he had bourgeois and liberal sources, and he was able to like find something within fucking Hegel to make the foundation of his body of work, right? And so I do want to say that, like, yes, it takes someone with skill. It takes someone adept at knowing what they're looking at. And to your point, Jeremy, the average person does not know what they're looking at and does not know what they'd be looking for. But it's there, and crumbs of it are there. And we can use that and leverage that when we're speaking to people.
Mm-hmm.
To help build bridges and create frames of reference that might be too far beyond what they could imagine or what they could surmise or what they could acknowledge about their daily lives, you know?
Yeah. I'll get into it more, I think. Well, we will probably get into it more in the episode, but I worry that just like kind of Bernie Sanders or whatever, anti-capitalist media tends to vent frustration and anger more than it does inspire movement,
which is what it's designed to do, right?
Right. But which sucks, because it's also for us probably the most enjoyable type of media to consume, because we're not there going like, oh my fucking god, here they go again.
That's the whole Bertolt Brecht thing, right? Where he's like, I don't want to give the audience catharsis, because if I give them catharsis, all the tension that they've been feeling has been relieved. What I want to do is leave that tension and make them sit with it, so that they can then take that anger and that energy and go and sort of express it in the real world. But you got to have some kind of political program, I think, behind that, or it's still kind of directionless. You know what I mean?
I don't know how well that's been done, right? Like, I studied theater, and I'd certainly rather read The Hunger Games than Hegel or Brecht.
Yeah. But is that, well, I don't know. We'll get into it when we talk about the actual examples.
I feel like a shitty Marxist for saying that, but like, it's not enjoyable to read or watch.
Yeah. So kind of further to Ray's point there about, like, you know,
that's our theory person, by the way.
kind of going off what Ray said there in regards to, you know, Marx himself didn't have Marxist sources or storytelling or whatever to pull from. And this made me think of favorite of the show, Joseph Stalin. In his early revolutionary days, the moniker, or the name that he went by before he went by Stalin, was Koba. And Koba, and I think I've mentioned this before in an episode, but essentially Koba, the figure before Stalin picked that name, was based on a character from Georgian legend, who was somebody who, essentially a Robin Hood figure, took from the rich, gave to the poor, fought against Tsarist oppression. And so, you know, there's power in these stories, and people in different places and different times will draw from that, I think. But with that said, as we've already mentioned, there are pitfalls, there are limitations. Probably the most obvious limitation, which we'll probably, I guess maybe we'll see if we'll get into this one, but is where there's a revolutionary character. Let's say, for example, in Black Panther, right? Everyone knows this example. Killmonger in that movie, the anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist, he was the villain, but he was in the right. But despite this, they tarnish his character by making him do stupid and insidious things which don't even align with his goals.
Went out in bodybuilding to turn into a community center, like.
Yes, exactly.
No, that's Black Panther. That's T'Challa does that later.
Well, I know, but I'm saying, like, that's how that was their answer to Killmonger.
Yeah.
We'll build this one
like,
community center. Wakanda will
we'll
send like 10 people to university every like 10 years or something like that, and like it's all good now.
Yeah, changing the world, guys.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll get into that. Let's start with the Hunger Games. Wait, sorry, do the whistle.
The oldest.
Someone do the whistle.
What whistle? Oh. Shocker.
husband thought that the shocker was the Pan Am symbol.
Yeah.
And he kept doing it every time I brought up the Hunger Games. And finally I was like, babe, why are you doing that? And he was like, isn't this the symbol? And I was like, it is absolutely not.
And you mean like the
is.
three fingers that they do in Hunger Games, right? He thought it was
Yes,
something
but he
else.
Yeah,
does-
so every time that you were doing like the three fingers, which I think is like the Girl Scout salute in the US,
Yeah.
but whatever, he was like doing this. And I was like, babe,
It's the wrong symbol.
that is not,
That's the wrong.
that is a very different revolution.
That one comes later.
They don't want us knowing the truth.
What's the truth?
I don't know.
The revolutionary potential of the shocker.
God help us.
We're
whatever
already off
works,
the rails and
whatever
we're
works.
like 5 minutes in.
Okay. So journey with me to Pan Am, a futuristic dystopia, roughly I don't know, I've seen things that say it's like 200 or 300 years in the future. This is a story, if you don't know, and I'm really sorry, we're just not going to be providing spoiler alerts for anything except for the most recent book. You've had 20 years to catch up on this. If you didn't want to, that's totally fine. So essentially what's happening is it's bad vibes. It's really, really bad vibes everywhere. And every year, 2 children from each district, there are 12 districts, have to go to some kind of arena that is built for spectacle for the people in the capital, which is the only present day Colorado, by the way, which is the only district, the only region of the country that doesn't have to send children, but they get fucked in other ways. You know what I'm saying? But they do get the pleasure of watching these children fight each other to the death. And that is the premise of this dystopian world.
Wait, why did they do that? Just for funsies?
No, because
But I've never
when
read
we
or
see-
seen it. So
Yeah. No. Please ask these questions. These are good. So when we start the first book, even though there's 2 prequels now, books, but when we start the first book and those 3 books became the movies that, if anyone has seen them, those 4 movies are from these 3 original books, these trilogies about, and our protagonist is Katniss Everdeen. Now there's 2 prequels that have also been released. But when we start the original trilogy with Katniss Everdeen, it's the 74th Hunger Games. So roughly 75 to like 85 years before this, there was something called the Dark Days, which is basically a civil war where the districts band together to try to overthrow the capital so that they can have more wealth distribution and like a fairer day. They are all having good vibes, but they lose. And to remind the districts of how shitty they were for losing, they have to send 2 of their children every year to die, to be sacrificed in the Hunger Games. If your child is the one who wins, for the next year, that district receives extra food rations, and that the tribute who wins gets to go to what's called the Victor's Village, which is like a special house. And if you live in most of the districts, they're quite poor. And so you wouldn't even have running water or hot water or electricity, but you would be guaranteed these things in the Victor's Village. So the Hunger Games exist to remind the capital that they are relatively better off than the districts, and to remind the districts that they lost and the rebels were bad guys, and it's actually much better to be hyper exploited under the capital regime. So basically, the capital is like relatively privileged people. I could talk about it a little bit as we go, but basically, the capital would be, if we were to look globally, the capital would be like the US. They have to pay for extortionate rent. It's like hyper competitive job market. They could be disappeared for saying something that the government doesn't like. They could be exiled for making like one fucking mistake, but they live in relative comfort and like even opulence. They have like very expensive beauty trends that they constantly have to and get to keep up with. Whereas like the rest of the districts, like you'd be lucky if you had like a bar of soap, and like, no, pretty much a bar of soap is like as far as your beauty regimen is going. And the rest of the districts would be basically like the hyper-exploited countries of the global south. So maybe they have like 1 or 2 extractive industries like coal mining. That's the one that's in Katniss's. And then there's other ones that are like doing better, like other districts that are doing better, like they make luxury goods. So I guess, I don't know what that makes you, like Germany. And they really are, because they have even though they're still exploited by the capital, they have a really close relationship and they're like more prized by the capital. And then it's like this very pervasive, like hyper militarized police force. So that's basically
Sorry,
what
Ray,
we're looking
I just
at.
want to reiterate something you said. They're being exploited by the capital.
It's not subtle.
Ayo. It's not subtle.
Yeah.
It's real. Well, okay, so here's the thing. It's both not subtle and it's not clear in any way.
Yeah.
So I do want to lead with a positive and start with the good. So if we want to talk about like what messages can we take, because I do think that like these stories are widely read and they very much inspire people. And there are people younger than us who say that reading those books when they were in their formative years didn't necessarily make them Marxists, but made them open to revolutionary theory. And then they later became Marxists. Like I've heard this from many people, who are not the olds like us. But one of the key like lessons that I think we can take from this is that there is no perfect revolution and there are no perfect revolutionaries. So we see the image of Katniss. She is sort of brought in to the revolution because she wants to protect her family. We see Peeta, who is like her love interest, and he wants to protect her. And he thinks that joining the revolution is the best way forward. But then we see Gale, who is like her other sort of love interest, and he's a sort of like diehard revolutionary. Right. And so that's one of the things and there's like many other people who are there. It's like the Capitol killed their family. And so now they're on the side of the rebels, or they joined, I'll tell you about, I said there was 12 districts, but there's actually this 13th district. We'll get into it. They joined District 13 and they feel a loyalty to District 13 because they didn't fucking starve to death and die. So they joined the revolution. Right. So there's like all these different reasons that people join the revolution and want to participate. And none of them are perfect. There is no perfect revolutionary and there's no perfect revolution. So again, I think that this is like very important and very relatable to people. The second one, interestingly, once we get past the revolutionary potential of the first and second book, and there's like an active war that is going on, which I'll explain more in a second, you see that they genuinely have a vanguardist model. Like they have career revolutionaries who are dedicating their lives to the revolution. And then there's other people who have other jobs who may do labor in service of the revolution. And so that's kind of interesting. I don't know if you'd agree with all the choices their vanguard makes, but they do have that. They're demonstrating it. And then the third thing that is reiterated in the most recent book that has just came out, so this hasn't been made into a movie yet, there is, I won't tell you too much in case you haven't had time to read it yet, but there is an attempt at a revolutionary action that backfires. And it's very similar to a revolutionary attempt that works later, decades later. And some of the same key players are part of both of this. And so it is a reminder that like revolutions take time, they take repeated attempts, and they take learning from mistakes and shortcomings. So like from there, I think these are important actual lessons that relate to people that could move them, if explained to them in an appropriate way, that could move them further along in their politics and in their curiosity. Now we get to that's not the good. It's the like, I wrote it in my notes as question mark, question mark, question mark.
Yellow flags.
The first question, the yellow flags. Although in this case, the red flags are the good ones, right? Okay. So now we get to the yellow flags. Question mark, question mark, question mark. So I have watched these movies a couple times, but I have read the books, including the two new ones, or two more recent ones, at least 3 times each. And having read this, it actually takes me back to when Tony and I watched The Sympathizer, which is a bonus episode, and I actually read the books. And I went through, 10 hours of this show that they threw $100 million at. I made myself read this book, which was not enjoyable. At the very least, The Hunger Games are a pleasant read. You like reading them. And I, for the life of me, could not tell you what the Vietnam War was about. And I am a communist podcaster who used to live in Vietnam, right? Which is like how I felt when I read and watched The Sympathizer. So having read these books 3 times each, watched the movies a couple times, there's so little that I could tell you about the economy or the means of production or ownership and how anything works. Through a very, very, very close read of the book, you do get like some information, which I'll try to explain here. But I am a literal fucking Marxist and an adult, a middle-aged adult who is a teacher. And even I don't know what is going on and like how this country operates.
And that's not uncommon. Like fiction quite often either ignores economics or misunderstands how economics work.
Absolutely, which I think is one of the themes that we're going to see here about the way that so-called anti-capitalist fiction doesn't really do the work of challenging capitalism. Because in order to do that, you would have to name what it is and explain how it works, and then explain how alternatives work. And so what we get is really sort of like certain information and then a sort of game of aesthetics that is really upheld and propagated even more obviously through the movie versions of these books, which is like that visual, storytelling where we can do things that it's not really written specifically in this way. But that's one of the things that I want to name that I'm like, I don't know how this economy works.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck am I looking at? What is the mode of production of this world? Because I've spent time while you guys overthrew this government and had a revolution, and I still don't know how any of this shit works. So the Capitol. Okay, I'll do a little breakdown of the Capitol versus District 13. So as I said, there are 12 districts, but there's actually a 13th. The Capitol propagandizes to the main 12 districts that District 13 no longer exists. However, District 13 does exist. They were known to be, their extractive industry was known to be graphite mining, but this was not true. They were actually developing nuclear weapons. And so when they wanted to cede from the Capitol and from Pan Am, the Capitol wanted to go to war with them, but there's no way that they could win because District 13 had the nukes. And so what they decided to do was bomb the shit out of the surface and tell them, you can't come above ground. We don't want anyone to see you. We don't want to hear you. And you all need to go live your lives underground, but we will leave you alone and we will give you your autonomy. And so this is the agreement that has been going on for some time, okay? So I just want to describe, because we spend the first 2 books in the Capitol, and then the 3rd book, we really shift to District 13. And the Capitol, as I've sort of alluded to before, is clearly like quote unquote authoritarian, quote unquote totalitarian. There's this man called the president, and he is a dictator. You can't vote for him. He doesn't even have a political party, let alone any other opposing political parties. And he's just in charge of everything. We also don't really see that he has any like even advisors or like a cabinet. Like it's literally just this guy. We know that the districts each have a mayor, but even the mayors can't really go to the Capitol. So there's nobody else. There's no senators. It's just like this guy. He's just a fucking guy. We find out in the prequel that he comes from a multi-generationally wealthy family of a military father, whatever, but he's basically just a guy, and he poisons people to get into power. And so basically he has no opposition because he poisoned all of them, which again is very easy to do if you're focused on this one sort of country. The premise of this book, by the way, if it's not clear, is like 300 years into the future, the climate catastrophe and collapse is so bad that even parts of the so-called United States don't exist anymore because of rising tides. And then it's kind of up for debate whether or not it's sort of left open-ended, whether or not actually nobody else exists, or they've all been wiped out and this is the only place where there's life on the planet, or if like the Capitol has just been propagandizing to its population that nobody else exists so that they don't try to leave because they think that there's nowhere else to. Okay, so the Capitol is clearly supposed to be this sort of like totalitarian capitalism in extreme decay, with the Capitol citizens, like I said, they're struggling, but they're doing better than anyone in the districts. And then the people in the districts who are absolutely hyper exploited and influenced negatively by varying degrees of interference from the highly militarized police force. Clearly, we see the existence of social class, generationally wealthy families. The police force and the military is used for like paying off debts. And in general, debt plays an enormous role in the economy, forcing people to work in the Capitol, and of course, forcing the kids to take something called tesserae in the districts. And the tesserae is basically like a grain and oil ration. And every time you take a tesserae, it makes you more likely to be reaped for the Hunger Games. So we see that debt plays like an outsized role in this society. And a lot of ways, it does feel very familiar to the world that we live in today in the West, and how that could look maybe in the future, suspending for like certain factors or whatever. We also see a very different conceptualization of race. There's no mention, aside from people having maybe lighter or darker skin or curly hair or olive skin or whatever. We do see that like maybe the people of Katniss's district were racialized in some way, which does make sense because it would map onto like modern day Appalachia. So while we racialize those people as white now, of course, when they migrated to the United States, the so-called United States, they were racialized, you know, Scotch-Irish people, et cetera, et cetera. and Central European immigrants and things like that. And so we also see that the agricultural district, District 11, these are people that are like the most racialized, the darkest skinned people. So we do see once again this sort of like echo of chattel slavery because it is also the most heavily policed and most militarized district. So we see the agricultural workers who, they're not called this in the books because they're not using this language anymore, which is also sort of an authoritarian or fascist tactic of obfuscating differences of people so that they can't articulate them, you know what I mean? But these basically, they'd probably be racialized as Black people doing agricultural labor in the most heavily militarized district. So that's sort of like what's going on in the capital. District 13, by contrast, is like highly equal, but not just equal, it is like absolutely the same. It's very bland. Everything is ugly. It's ugly overhead lighting. It's literally underground. Everyone's clothes are the same. The food is the same. It's calculated for your calories. You can't have more or less. And things and extra resources and anything that would give you joy is very, very, very limited or not available at all. These are people who frown on dancing. They don't like to play music.
I find like it just so odd because the depiction of the capital, it's such a good metaphor or analogy for capitalism in decay, as you've just explained. And then when they show like the actual, or, you know, like the opposing or equally powerful revolutionary side, and it's like the most ridiculous but the most popular presentation of the Soviet Union, essentially, right? That everyone is the same, we eat the same, we all wear gray, and like we're sad and stuff like that, but like we believe in equality.
So as we'll discuss, it is all the Soviet Union. But we'll get to it in a second.
I was going to say that because when you described the president, or do you mean like the capital and District 13? Yeah.
It's all the Soviet Union.
Because when you described the president, I was like, man, that is just like the caricature of Stalin that you just explained.
Although, if I would say that District 13 to me reads more DPRK. Not actual DPRK, by the way. I mean the Western retelling and the Western imaginary of what the DPRK is like. That they have a nuke, that they keep to themselves, and that everything is like boring, bland, the same, and incredibly restrictive and not at all fun.
And it was destroyed on the surface by the United States, crushed, and
that they were told that they were allowed to and that they're still told to this day that they're allowed to keep to themselves because they have their nuke.
Exactly, because they can't, the United States cannot attack or invade the DPRK because it has nuclear weapons. And that is, that is a valid point. I mean, the rest of it's all goofy, but...
And so I would say that, we do get an example. District 13, period, is a moneyless, classless society. Even the people in the higher ranks, they do also, as I said, they have a vanguard model, but those vanguardists are not given any special privileges. They have to keep to the same schedule. They have to eat the same food. They have to live in the same kind of little cubbies as everyone else. We do have a moneyless, classless society. However, very obviously, it is not a society that has reached any degree of abundance whatsoever. So this is not the communism that Marx is writing about or that anyone is trying to move toward, right? Because obviously they're heavily sanctioned. Although, by the way, one of these just weird things that you start to think is it's very unclear to me. I don't know. The only thing that makes sense to me is in addition to the capital leaving them alone, they do have some kind of trade agreement because even though everything is really limited, they say Katniss says she hides in the school supply closet because nobody is coming in to get school supplies because nobody wastes anything and nobody needs more of anything. But I'm do they have a fucking paper mill? Okay, so they say they have a poultry farm. Okay, fair enough. But would they have a loom? They have a paper mill. They have a carpet. They have a steel mill. This seems incredibly unlikely to me. How, even if they're reusing things, how you would even build this bunker. You know what I'm saying? So I don't really know. That part is very unclear, and that doesn't really get explained. But whatever. And so it's this highly equal society, but it's also really not fun, and no one would like to live there. Which really brings us to the terrible. Which number one is it's just horseshoe theory. Mm-hmm. You have the capital with all of its extravagance, but also all of its deep, deep, deep inequality. And the other alternative is absolute equality, but it's completely fucking miserable. And everything is authoritarian all the way down. And even though there is a vanguardist model in 13, they still have, their president coin, and they still have their policies of the state, out of which the vanguard arises versus the vanguard dictating to the state. So even though, again, as I said, this would be an example of a vanguardist model who's leading the revolution, they don't have the same say about how things actually function within the state. There's a kind of it's not really a contradiction, but it's certainly not like a Soviet model or a Marxist-Leninist model by any stretch of the imagination. And again, I am a Marxist fucking teacher, and I had to read these books several times, even just to like eke out that amount of analysis. So that would be kind of a bad thing. So yeah, the two terribles is the first terrible is like, it's very clearly horseshoe theory, right? They're both just as bad. And even the end of the third book, Katniss is supposed to, she's a talented archer, a very skilled archer. And so she's supposed to shoot an arrow at President Snow, but she realizes that actually President Coin is just as bad. And so she shoots her instead. President Coin dies, President Snow gets trampled. And then they put this like nice woman, Paler, who's pretty cool, in charge of the country. And then at the end, they're all like, oh, there used to be this thing called democracy and we should probably do it again.
Hooray.
So that's one of the bads. And then the other bad, to a previous point, is especially, again, as this story is told explicitly in a different way in the movie than it is in the book because it's a visual medium, the Capitol is extremely Soviet coded. All of the buildings, the really big road that they all go down, the way that they demonstrate that, like, you are looking at the Soviet Union. And that imagery absolutely kills me because it makes it very, very, very hard for your average Westerner to imagine any other way of doing things and any other kind of revolution that you would be having or any other impact that an oppressive system is having on you. Like, you don't see it around you if you're looking at New York, right? So they have to make the Capitol look like the former Soviet Union.
Yeah.
If I recall, like, there's kind of like that socialist, realist aesthetic that they use in the movie for artwork in the Capitol.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like the architecture and the streets and even kind of like some of the cars, like you don't see a lot of them, but like the vehicles and even like the chariots, you know, they're sort of giving like Soviet Union and like maybe kind of Cuba.
Yeah.
Which makes no real sense.
Because in what future did we have Soviet? I mean, you'd have to, I guess everything was bombed and we had to build it all again and we made it look like the Soviet
center
Union.
of capital exploitation.
Where in Colorado?
Yeah. They're not gonna be developing.
Where in Boulder, Colorado is giving Stalingrad?
Nowhere. In fact, it's a lot of like
tragically
1930s brick houses.
So I will say that I think there's another aesthetic element, at least in, maybe not aesthetic, but at least in, say, for example, the way things are named. So a lot of the characters in the Capitol, they have like these Roman sounding names, right?
Greek and Roman names. They all have Greek. Plutarch.
Plutarch, Seneca, Peta. No, I don't know how to say that.
Do you want me to look up a list? Do you want me to look up Greek?
Snow.
We have, and like so many of their
Gyro.
tributes and things like that. So, even the kids in the
falafel.
We have like we find out that Jesus Christ. We find out that President Snow, Coriolanus is his first name, Coriolanus Snow's father's name is Crassus. We have like Flavius, Fulvia, Hilarius, Iphigenia.
Is his name really Hilarious?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Livia, Iphigenia, Euphemia, Felix, Festus, Volumnia, Portia, Pollux, Vipsania.
What I'm getting
so it's
from
like
this
the
is
West.
Yeah. And they're an empire too. I think that they're going for, it's like the Roman Empire,
the Greek Empire.
I can just see them like trying to like brainstorm this. They're like
Empire,
Soviet Union, Soviet Empire, Stalin, evil kind of thing.
And there are Greek myths on which a lot of the plot points are based. Things that you see like something very similar to the reaping or relationship to certain like deity figures and things like this that are like echoes of Greco-Roman, Greek and Roman mythology that she's sort of like drawing from. Suzanne Collins is sort of drawing from.
Which is a tactic that's used quite a bit in like ostensibly anti-capitalist media, is they obfuscate the parallel so that it kind of seems apolitical, right? You can't be targeting anybody.
What's been really interesting about the Hunger Games is that actually, and I think we're going to see this like echoed throughout all of the media that we're examining, is it's actually marketed to look extremely political. But when you look a little bit closer, you're, like I said, like, what is the means of production of this country? Like how does money work in this society? And really, it's not critiquing anything other than like bad guys.
Hunger Games the premise is just battle royale, which if anybody It's, I believe, a manga before this, but it was a Japanese film that came out in the late 90s, I want to say, which was about some far-flung future in Japan where the economy is so shitty that they have an overabundance of young people who just kind of roam the streets and commit crimes. And so to deal with that, they cull a certain number of graduating high school students or current high school students, and they put them all on an island, and they have to kill one another on this island. And the winner gets some, wonderful life that they get to lead. It's that is all the same as the Hunger Games. It's just the Hunger Games takes a broader view. But yeah, no, I think it's worth mentioning that the basic premise of the Hunger Games is not unique or new. And in fact, it's very, very similar to Battle Royale.
What I'm taking from this, Ray, is that there are, of course, revolutionary themes to be drawn from the Hunger Games, but kind of at the end of the day, the limitation put on the storyline, whether that's by the author's intentions, the capitalist economy, whatever it is that ultimately it's still anti-communist in the way it presents revolution, the way it presents.
At the end of the day, it still gets one in the stink.
At the end of the day, they're both as bad as the other. And if we could just get back to a regulated liberal democracy, this would be our best bet.
Doesn't say can you imagine it's in Panem 300 years from now they're like, guys, you remember how good it was in 2015? Things were perfect. Oh god. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
The only other thing, and I didn't know whether to keep this in or leave this up, but I know probably some of our listeners have read the new book. With the prequels, I don't want to say too much about it, but basically I don't know that this was Suzanne Collins' intention when she set out to write these books, and I doubt it was because many years have gone by, but there have been fan theories that have been, I think the fan theories have been integrated into the book. I don't know for sure. I really have no way to know that, but they sort of revolve around different people being targeted by the Capitol specifically, and this sort of conspiracy of the Capitol against these individual citizens and their families continues. And I don't want to suggest that never happens in the real world, because of course it does. But as it is narrativized, what it sort of leads through to, one, is sort of fated, you are fated for revolution or you are not. Two, again, it takes us back to the totalitarian state that is watching your every move and always able to keep up with everyone's actions. And three, there's something violent about the absolute brutal, chaotic, bumbling empire that gets it wrong more often than it gets it right. And so when it's this hyper precise targeting, now I can understand, again, these are young adult books, and you want to, if we were to compare it to another piece of media that's not going to end up on this, Kim Stanley Robinson's Ministry for the Future, which I did not enjoy reading at all, because there's just too many fucking people, and I cannot keep track of who's doing what and where they are, and it covers such a long period of time that I'm I can't connect with any of these people. So I do understand it's yes, these multi-generational revolutionaries, that's a very real thing, or people that are targeted over and over and over again, or types of people that are targeted, whatever. It's true. And also, it allows the reader to, on one hand, it allows the reader to build a relationship with the characters and their stories and kind of keep track of everyone. But on the other hand, it sort of misses something about the violence of empire, that it is not perfectly targeted against people that deserve it, or people who even they think deserve it. It's random and cruel and stupid. And there's a part of the prequels that is going in a direction that is that sucks. That really sucks. I hate that.
Is there something that we talked about, I don't even remember, maybe a bonus episode, I don't know, everything's been a blur. We talked about how constantly there is this consistent element of luck in any anti-capitalist media, right? Is that present in Hunger Games? It really has nothing to do with the work and the building of the movement. It has to do with right place, right time. Somebody just happened to blah, 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 and then everything fell apart.
I actually think Hunger Games kind of does it both ways. You as the reader don't know everything because you're with Katniss, and she knows absolutely fucking nothing. So basically she takes this revolutionary action, but there is a building movement that has been decades long that has been waiting for the revolutionary moment. So you as a reader are experiencing it you don't know what's going on and you're finding out, but actually there are real adults. That is something I appreciate, that the core of the revolution is adults and professional revolutionaries and not teenagers.
Do we know anything about Suzanne Collins, her politics? Or
I have tried to find out, and she pretty much, she doesn't speak about it. She sticks to mostly kids and young adult
Let's get her on
books
the
as
podcast.
well. I thought for a long time, I was like, maybe she's just an anarchist and all of her representations of the state are that. But I don't know that sometimes I'm like, she's an anarchist. And then sometimes when I look at visually what she's allowed to happen to her storytelling, I know that that's like a complicated, like, I don't know the back end of those like licensing deals or whatever, or if she was even allowed to have a say in that. But there's a part of me that's like, or maybe she's just a liberal who like feels uncomfortable about like the state, and I don't really
I think
know.
we should move on to the next franchise.
You can probably come up with a better segue than that.
that
honestly.
wasn't my segue. That was just for us. Yeah.
I was like, shut the
Hey,
fuck
Ray,
up, Ray.
could you zip it? Okay, next on to the next thing. Yes, so no, thanks for that, Ray. As a result of Prolespod's undying commitment to radical centrism, we do have a counter sponsor today, who's here to promote the alternate view to our main sponsor of the episode, which is, of course, the wonderful and totally normal folks at the Committee to Make Star Wars Apolitical Again. In an effort to remain fair and balanced, we've chosen to give airtime to up-and-coming filmmaker, the director of Red Tails and American Graffiti, Mr. George Lucas, who has some thoughts on the original Star Wars trilogy's politics.
You did something very interesting with Star Wars, if you think about it. The good guys are the rebels. They're using asymmetric warfare against a highly organized empire. I think we call those guys terrorists today. We call them Mujahideen, we call them Al-Qaeda.
When I did it, they were Viet Cong.
Exactly. So were you thinking of that at the time?
Yes.
So it was a very anti-authoritarian, very kind of 60s against the man kind of thing, nested deep inside of a fantasy.
Or a colonial, we're fighting the largest empire in the world.
Right.
And we're just a bunch of hayseeds in coonskin hats that don't know nothing.
That's right.
And it was the same thing with the Vietnamese.
Yep.
The irony of that one is in both of those, the little guys won.
Right.
And the big, highly technical empire,
the English Empire, right?
The English
British
Empire, the American Empire,
Yep.
lost.
Yeah.
That was the whole point.
And now, back to the show. So which franchise do we want to conquer next?
I think Andor is maybe the big one, because Andor does some things, which Andor does some things substantially better and some things substantially worse. So for people who have not seen it, all three of you, Andor is a Tony Gilroy property. He sort of created this. It's a prequel to the movie Rogue One, features Cassian Andor, who is one of the main characters in that movie, and kind of explains his entire journey, basically from kind of a random terrorist, more or less, to
Anarchist,
becoming,
kind of,
to becoming a part of the revolution, the Rebel Alliance, and how he got to that position. And it begins, it's unique in that it does not tie up every loose end that it brings to the table, because the point of he's trying to find his sister for the first several episodes of the first season. That's his entire motivation, is to try to find his sister. But the point of that was that he was so willing to put everything on the line for his family that he ended up doing things that got him noticed by the Rebel Alliance, more or less. It's not even the Rebel Alliance at this point. It's this one guy who is a central figure in what will become the Rebel Alliance. But another great thing about Andor is that it points out the fact that the Old Republic itself was imperialist. Cassian Andor grows up on this planet, which is very like his group of people that he's with. Obviously, these are human beings, and so they've been spread across the galaxy. They are not native to this planet, but they're very indigenous coded, right? They speak a language that is not basic, which is English, more or less, in the Star Wars universe. And they hunt with very sort of basic weapons, and
they seem to not really understand what starships are or anything like that.
Right. They probably are people who got stranded on this planet, and they're the descendants of people who have been there for whatever, 100 years, or 200 years or 500 years, who knows. But the Old Republic is strip mining this planet. I mean, absolutely just decimating it, destroying it ecologically. And that's a key sort of like piece of the imagery, piece of the puzzle. And it's probably one of the reasons that Andor's like, he's not super interested in joining the rebellion, because he's like, the Old Republic was really bad. It sounds like you guys want a new republic. What am I doing this for? But his sister, he gets separated from his sister at one point because there's like a ship that crashes on his home planet, and he goes into it to scavenge pieces, but he gets knocked unconscious. I forget exactly how that happens. And then he gets taken by some scavengers from outer space, from the stars, and they take him away. Yes, and then that's right. And they take him away from the planet, and he grows up basically with these two scavengers as his mother and father figure, more or less. But his sister is still on this like homeworld. There is
presumably they said she's probably dead, like they're his
right, because there was a huge disaster that happens on that planet shortly after Andor is taken away, and so she may be dead, but he's chasing all these rumors that she's still alive. And in the process of doing that, he kills 2 corporate security guards. And this sets off like a snowball effect that just ends up, I mean, God, it's such a well-written show. There is, in that first season, there is no time wasted. Everything is important. Every scene, something profound is being said, or some sort of narratively important plot device is taking place. Some vital piece of character development is going on. There's like this weaselly corporate security middle management guy, and his name is Cyril, and he is so hateable, but he's also so well written that you're just like, God, I like, unbelievable. There's a point basically halfway through the first season where they do a bank heist where they are stealing massive amounts of money basically to fund the rebellion from it's like an imperial payroll thing, and that is based upon the heist that Tony mentioned, I think, it was Martine who mentioned in the episode 0 of the Stalin series, the bank robbery that he participates in. That event is based upon that. So I would say that, unfortunately, so I have a friend who calls this Rebels Without a Cause, because there is no point in the entirety of the 2 seasons of Andor where anybody articulates a coherent political program that they are a part of. It is just that they are more or less anti-fascist, anti-imperial. That's it, though. They make vague gestures towards like freedom and like democratic values, but there's no one ever says exactly what they stand for.
There was a moment where in the first season, and I wonder if it got like shot down by the censors or if it was just an intentional thing, but where the young guy who has created this theory, but like basically this materialist theory that he's been recording into like an audiobook essentially,
right,
articulating this theory of revolution. And I was like, oh fuck, like this is going to get so good. And then it just fucking drops off the face of the earth. And
well,
like
he gets killed. He gets killed immediately
but
after
Andor
he reveals
gets his
it.
And
books.
it's called a manifesto, isn't it? Yeah.
It is a manifesto, yeah.
But they never fucking talk. They talk about it one time after he dies, and that's it.
Yes, there's a scene where Andor is like listening to it, I think, or is it Bix? It's either Andor or Bix is actually listening to him talk, but it's like a snippet of the manifesto, and they never come back to it.
I got so excited. I thought that was going to be the guiding light throughout the whole. Like I thought it was going to be like him speaking from beyond the grave, kind of directing this revolution.
And
that's not at all what happened.
Very good at is showing how practically you need to conduct yourself to carry out a revolution.
It is. As far as popular media is concerned, I've never seen a revolution portrayed that accurately ever.
Correct. Yeah, it's not. So again, like fundamentally from a theory perspective, it's weak sauce. It's very like thin. You get very little understanding of how, again, sort of the economic piece, the political piece, any of that is meant to function. what these people want when they win, but how to get to the point of winning, fucking profound.
Right. And I think that's there. It is very much like China or the Soviet Union. It is very much a collection of factions that have different views. They paint Saw Gerrera very much as the anarchist. He wears all black. He has no real direction except to just cause chaos and destroy as much as he can of the empire. Then they've got, Mothma, who's kind of like the liberal social democratic movement. And then of course you've got Luthen, who is, I guess, supposed to be kind of the Leninist of the group, but he never actually articulates his, what it is that he wants.
I think we should, at this point, insert the speech that he gives to his double agent in the ISB, the Imperial Security Bureau. Because it is unbelievable. Because so there's a scene towards the end of the first season where this guy's like, I need to meet with you immediately. This double agent who's in the ISB, and so he meets him in this weird underground section of Coruscant that's like an like maintenance, who knows, tunnel or something like that. It
Coruscant's
looks
the capital of the
correct
Empire.
of the Empire and the Old Republic and eventually the New Republic. It is meant, I think, to mirror when Luke Skywalker is on Bespin and he's chasing Darth Vader, and he comes up that elevator and the doors open and Darth Vader is in the tunnel, that maintenance tunnel, and he kind of steps out and starts throwing all the pieces of debris at him or whatever. I think that's meant to mirror this, because first, Luthen is wearing a cape. He is in silhouette, and he is like a bastard. He is not a good guy, but he's doing what he has to do in order to make the revolution succeed. And so this guy is like, I need out. He's like, I'm scared. I have a family. They're going to catch me. And Luthen is like, are you fucking serious? I was like, he's like, you are the guy. You are my guy in this place, and I cannot replace you. You cannot be replaced. And the guy's like, I can't keep doing this. I've sacrificed so much. He's like, what the fuck have you sacrificed? And Luthen is like, what? And then this is the speech that I think we should insert literally into the audio of this episode, because it is so good. It's so poignant. And it is sort of what, if you are dedicated to the cause, what the sort of perspective you need to have, that you're willing to give up yourself, your freedom, your sense of morality, your concept of what is good and what is bad, and focus on what needs to be done.
You're trapped, Lonnie. There's no pleasure in saying it, but you're going nowhere.
My sacrifice means nothing to you, does it?
I said I think of you constantly, and I do. Your investment in the rebellion is epic. The double life, everyday performance, the stress of that. We need heroes, Lonnie, and here you are.
And what do you sacrifice?
Calm. Kindness, kinship. Love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago, from which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, they set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there was no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything! You'll stay with me, Lonnie. I need all the heroes I can get.
So there's that aspect to it. There's also the fact that Luthen is trying desperately to get these disparate, rebellious groups to come together to fight as one team. And that, he goes to Saw Gerrera and he's like, please, he's like, please, you need to work with so-and-so. That's another good scene too, because he initially wants him to work with this guy, Anton Krieger. He's like, you need to work with Anton Krieger. You need to get together with him. And then it turns out that Krieger has been discovered by the Imperials as a rebel fighter, and that they know he's going to attack this place. And he's like, well, we are going to have to sacrifice Krieger, because if we don't sacrifice Krieger, if we warn him that this is happening, then the Imperials will know that we've got a mole within their system, and we can't give that up. So we have to let him die. And so he goes back to Saw Gerrera, and Saw's like, I've decided I'm going to go help Krieger. And he's like, don't do it. He's like, he's like, you have to let him go. And they have this conversation. And that's another great scene where Saw Gerrera is like 30 men. And Luthen is like, and Krieger. And then Saw Gerrera says, for the greater good. And Luthen says, call it what you will. And Gerrera goes, let's call it war. And I'm like, oh, like, again, such like profoundly good writing in the show. Yeah. It's such a good fucking show.
Luthen's
I don't know.
like
what
the
are
hero, but they always paint him as the. I mean, they don't really paint him as a villain. It's very like nobody's the bad guy, nobody's the good guy, except for like the top ranking Imperial people. But like everybody's kind of right, like everybody's just doing their thing. This second season we won't go into in depth about.
It's a tragedy because this was supposed to be a 5-season show, and I think it's just
Gilroy
very
got
expensive
bored.
to make. Because it was just.
I read an interview with Gilroy, and he said that it was his decision. He said that they originally thought it out to be 5 seasons, 1 year per season, and he said after they had finished the first season, he was like, it was exhausting how to like go moment by moment and make it all matter. And he's like, and I just felt like I couldn't do that for 4 more seasons. And so that's why they split it up into the 3
the 3
sections,
episodes
basically.
per year.
Yeah, 1 year. Yeah, exactly.
But it did feel much more rushed.
Yeah. And it's also much more milquetoast and watered down. Like the second season's kind of it's still very good, but the revolutionary potential is much lower. It feels much more like kind of a liberal strike at like authoritarianism. They make like there's a lot of shit that doesn't make sense. I'll get to that in a second. But one of the things that we didn't talk about is the fucking jail sequence in the first season of Andor is like one of the most masterful stories I think I've ever seen. I mean, it's probably also based on Stalin's time in Siberia or whatever. It's very like well done, very extreme, very visceral, real. I mean, it's super cool. So yeah, and then we get into the second season. Like I said, we won't really talk about it too much because it's still very new, and I haven't even finished the last 2 episodes. But there's like shit that doesn't like. So everything in the first season makes sense. Everybody's motivations make sense to me, which is an important part of any media that I'm consuming. Like I always want to know, like, oh yeah, if I was this person in this scenario, this is what I would do. Even if it's like a liberal, right? I would be like, if I was a liberal, this is the decision I would make, right? But then there's this weird moment in season 2 where Luthen and Andor are in an argument about what to do with Palestine coded. What's it called?
Palestine,
Gorman.
but also the French resistance during World War II. Yeah, it's like a.
But yeah, on this planet called Gorman, and Andor is like, these guys are not fucking ready. Like they're basically anarchists is what he's trying to say without saying the words, right? He's like, they're undisciplined. They are too brash. They're making rash decisions, blah, blah, blah. And Luthen, the same guy who had this conversation, the speech that we just heard, the same guy is like, basically, well, I don't fucking care, we need him, which makes no sense because before this, he has always been extremely like, nope, I'm not fucking with you because you don't have your shit together, right?
Yeah, very pragmatic.
And it made no sense to me why that happened. And my guess is they try to turn him into a villain at the very end of the second season, but it's stupid.
It's no, well, I think the reason for that was because then he sends the waif from Game of Thrones and her girlfriend to Gorman to basically teach these people how to like act right. I mean, more or less.
I understand the plot reasoning, but it doesn't make sense from his character's motivation standpoint. And the whole Vel Cinta story was so superfluous anyway. Like, I don't even understand why, except to get diversity or something.
I think part of the problem is that I would guess, like, it just sending Andor there in the first place was a weird decision because he goes there and then he leaves, and then Cinta shows up, and then Andor comes back later, and I'm just like, I feel like
what's
this is
happening.
I feel like this was a decision that was made after they decided to compress everything and they needed to have Andor in the episode. And so the only way to have Andor in the episode was for him to go to Gorman in the first place. It didn't make any logical sense.
There was a lot of democratic centralism, which I thought was really neat. They constantly reference like the oh, sorry, you can't fucking follow orders, then get the fuck out. Like, there's a lot of that, which is great. Then there's they mention the words general strike twice in the 8th episode, which I thought is cool because as a general rule, you will never hear the words general strike in capitalist media. The chants were fucking terrible. They could have done a million times better with that. And I felt like they kind of got lost in the second season with the few bad apples thing, where they're like, well, if we just didn't have this one, or this one.
I think so. Getting back to the problem with the Hunger Games, where the fascists are always good, always on point, always like powerful. They always know what's going on. Andor does a very good job of, first of all, showing how many and how much goes into maintaining this baseline level of oppression. Like, you have so many functionaries, so many bureaucrats, so many like administrators that you need to keep that going. And they each have their own selfish little motivations. They have their own like desires for power. They like it's all very, it's portrayed as all being very like mundane and office politics kind of bullshit. And they fuck up quite often. They're very good sometimes, and they're very effective sometimes, but they also make massive mistakes. Yeah, like there's Cyril becomes so fixated on catching Andor that he can't see anything else. And then Dedra Meero is so fixated on power and glory for herself that she fucks up repeatedly. Justin, you haven't got to the last 2 episodes, so I don't know if you've seen when she confronts Luthen. Yeah, again, fucking just powerfully stupid mistake made for her own pride, basically, which is it's good to show that kind of stuff because these people are not invincible. They are not all powerful. They are human beings and therefore subject to all manner of poor decision making.
Yeah, I think that that's actually a really important parallel. And on one hand, while I think, like I said, like one of the key takeaways from the Hunger Games can be like, there is no perfect revolutionary and people are there for their own diverse set of reasons. When they are humanized, but like the fascist end is either seen as like totally organized and flattened, or like in the case of the Hunger Games, it's just a guy, just one guy making all the decisions. Yeah. It also increases the rebels' fallibility, right? Because like if the fascists, yes, maybe they're boring and dehumanized and they're clearly the villain, but if they're also completely unified, or there's just one of them, right? Whichever one it is, then it's like way harder for them to fuck up. And it just seems like the revolution just seems so fucking futile because it's like, oh, they're a well-oiled machine and we're a merry band of brothers, right? Although one of the criticisms, and I don't know how the criticisms of Andor have been, now we're talking about boy stuff, but one of the criticisms of the prequel of the Hunger Games was like, oh, you shouldn't like share about the president. It's one of the first prequels about his like childhood and his formative years and his early adulthood. And it's like, oh, you shouldn't show that because it humanizes him and that's like not good or something like that. So I also think that, which I think is stupid. Your childhood is also your material conditions, like grow up. But I mean, there were other things I didn't care for in that book. It wasn't as interesting as the other ones, of course, because he's a far less sympathetic figure. And even when you go through it, it's like you understand why he is the way that he is, but he's still like a bit like he sucks. You're not like, oh, what a guy.
I mean, that's one of the things about the first season is that you figure out why Cyril is the way he is, because his mother is also an incredible character as well. She's like overbearing, incredibly demanding, has like basically guided him through his life, told him what he should and shouldn't be doing, made him feel guilty because he doesn't do what what's his name? Uncle something or another.
Yeah, I remember.
He's like, she's constantly bringing up the fact that Uncle so-and-so got you this job and you're fucking it up, like this sort of thing. And so he's heavily driven, but he's also like wormy and put upon, and like, he's like a goofy, he hates himself, but he hates Andor more because Andor basically humiliated him.
Yeah, that's really giving like Les Miserables.
Oh, it's like that. Yeah, it's very like Jean Valjean kind of like.
And Javert, right?
Yeah.
Like...
So Jeremy, do you have any concluding thoughts on Andor?
I loved this show. The second season again is not as strong as the first, but it's a great like blueprint for revolution, if not a politically coherent. It's probably the least explicitly anti-capitalist of these that we're going to talk about, but it is the most like consistent in terms of methodology, not ideology.
Yeah, they don't apologize. There are no apologies for like killing people that are innocent or anything like that. They just
it's like, this is how you have to do it.
Yeah, exactly. You know about the rebellion. Sorry, you got to die. Like, there's not this big oh, boo-hoo, like this person's now a bad guy. There's none of that. It's like revolution is revolution, and it's not a dinner party.
So sweet. Thanks for that, Jeremy. Justin, what you got for us?
If anyone is like, the Proles are, long-winded, but not as long-winded as usual, it's because Tony has to leave to record an episode of his other podcast.
What? He has another podcast?
He does, yeah.
Yeah,
you didn't know that?
Existing
the sponsor for this episode is actually Existing Socialism.
So I'm going to talk about a show that we almost did a whole last episode on called Severance. And it's hard to talk about Severance.
It is.
I am not sure if I am 16 again, high as fuck, listening to At the Drive-In and interpreting the lyrics that make no sense into something that matches the exact philosophy that I have. But that's how Severance feels to me. It's almost too politically perfect.
It's the most Marxist piece of media I've ever seen produced by a capitalist corporation.
Yeah, it's wild. So the premise of Severance is some distant or not so distant future. It's very obscure. There's like technology that's very advanced, and there's very old, like retro technology. The cars are like from the 70s or what? You have theories?
I have theories as to why that is. Yeah.
There's now we're listening to At the Drive-In again, interpreting things. There's like advanced technology and not advanced. Anyway, so it's very obscure. The show is very insular. It is not, they don't do world building at all. You don't really know where anything is, what anything is, where it came from, how it ended up that way. But essentially the premise of the show is, in this future, there is a company called Lumen, which has a technology, and in this company Lumen, it seems kind of like almost like a Walmart or GE or something that does everything, right? They don't just have a specific market, right? They don't just
like Mitsubishi,
right? Yeah, right? They do all kinds of stuff, although it's never really shown what they do. And their workers, some of them, work on what is called the severed floor, and these workers have an implant in their brain which allows them to separate their work selves from their not work selves. And so when they go up this elevator, the severance like happens essentially. They are severed from their outside self and they become their work self. And then when they go down the elevator, the work self is severed and the home self is like awoken or whatever. So their entire life on the outside is whatever the fuck they want to do. But their entire life on the inside is work. Like they, as far as their consciousness is concerned, they step onto an elevator after work and then the door opens and they're back at work again. And he does this, the main character, the fuck is his name?
Scout.
Mark Scout. Yeah. So Mark does this because his wife dies in a car accident and he just like can't handle the grief anymore, basically tears his life apart. He can't function it as a professor anymore. He was working as a professor. And so he decides to undergo this severance procedure. The cost of that is that you work for Lumen, right? You get to your severance thing, but you also work for Lumen. His life on the outside is in fucking shambles, right? He's a fucking asshole. And
he spends most of his time sleeping on the couch or watching TV or and ignoring his family. His sister is trying
smarmy.
desperately. Yeah.
He's very smarmy and condescending. He's very defensive of anybody that like talks about like Lumen or Severance in general. And on the inside, he is a middle manager, essentially. He's the supervisor of their little office of 4 people. And it starts with him becoming the manager of this floor because his best work friend quits or is fired, or he doesn't know, right? He just comes in, he steps off the elevator and he's no longer there. And this really fucks with him because he like has, it's like his favorite person on the inside. And he's like, where is this person? Nobody wants to tell him like what happened. So he becomes the supervisor and he starts training this new girl on the severed floor, and she doesn't want anything to fucking do with it, right? She's like, nope, not gonna, like, because these people wake up, they have no idea who they are. They wake up on this table, they don't know who they are, they don't know why they're there, they don't know what they're supposed to be doing.
They're a new human being. Like they have basic, they got language skills and they understand communication and whatever, but they have no memories which precede waking up on this table. They are work people. They are workers. That's their entire life is work.
And she's like, fuck this. Like, I don't want, like, I want to live my life. Like, I want to enjoy shit. And they're like, well, you are living your life. You're just, you don't know about it. And so she tries, the whole first season essentially is her trying to get the fuck off of the severed floor, almost exclusively. And the guy that, his best friend, Pete, who was just disappeared, essentially, it's revealed that he's reversed his severance procedure. And what this does is it essentially fucks him up mentally and then it kills him. And Mark finds this out on the outside, and it starts off this kind of chain of events of him trying to understand the severed floor and like what's happening and why it's like that, and is it humane or not humane, and blah blah blah.
So could you say he had a false consciousness?
Yes. Yeah, that's the thing, is like that's the thing about Severance, is that it is very like Marxist in the traditional sense, like not including like any of the later sort of improvements or additions to Marxism. It's very much about alienation. It's very much about false consciousness. It is very much about consciousness, like workers' consciousness. Later on, as they develop, like the workers begin to band together. They begin to sort of stand up for their rights. They begin to fight back against the company. But it introduces all these like really complicated moral arguments, because if you quit, you are essentially killing that person, right? Because they only exist on that floor. And if you never go back to it, you have killed them. You have destroyed them as an entity. Then there's the whole the reintegration or whatever, where they attempt to combine the two marks back together, and there's initially hesitance on the part of they call them innies and outies.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it is.
It's a comedy. It's like a comedy show, but also
it is a comedy.
dramedy.
Yeah, it's a dramedy for sure. Yeah,
there's so much
work they're
shit
doing. Yeah, there's so much. It's hard to talk about because there's so much going on.
Yeah.
The work that they do it appears random at first. And it is like they have a
They have no
screen.
connection. They have no connection to their means of production, like what they're doing.
Yes, they are heavily alienated from what's going on because they don't even know what they're doing. They look at a screen of numbers, and they have like an old school like 80s like trackball that they slide around the screen and highlight different numbers, and then they just intuitively they see it and they go, these numbers look weird, and then they put them in a box. Like that's the entire function of their job, and they have no idea why they're doing it or what it's
like
what's
scary numbers go into this box, and more joyful numbers go into this box.
Yeah, it's such abstract shit.
But they like the way that they represent management and the workers and middle management is so perfect. Like they well, if you complete your quota, you could get a finger trap, and they have little like they have like a pancake party, like as one of the
number one most productive worker at the end of the quarter gets a pancake party.
Waffle party.
A waffle party, you're right, a waffle party.
And the like middle management guy comes in and has waffles with them, and they're dancing around and like listening to, what was the name of the jazz?
Oh my God. Yeah.
It's like unobtrusive jazz, or like,
something like that.
It's like, it's some like, the names of the songs in this shit are so fucking funny. The middle management guy, he's a Milchik. Yeah, Milchik is a black middle manager, and he's like, he wants to be the guy, right? He wants to climb the corporate ladder, and they fuck him up by, at the end of the like first season, when his boss gets supplanted and he takes his boss's job, they provide him these pictures of so the way they deify the CEOs of this company is so great.
So this company's been in operation since the 1800s, and the founder of the corporation is like a god,
like a Jesus type figure. Yeah.
Yes, and then all of the subsequent CEOs are his children and his children's children and his children's children's children.
And their employee handbook is like a Bible, like it's like scripture. Right. But anyway, so they provide Milchik with these like pictures of the Lumen founders, but they're all black in the pictures. Yes. So like they give him these, even though they're white in reality.
They've changed the race.
They changed the race of these CEOs and give him these pictures. And he's like has this moment where he's just like, the fuck? Like, what am I doing? Like what? Like
it's the interaction between him and the representative of the board, who is also black, is the pain behind her eyes is like palpable and beautiful. It's such a well acted scene because she gives it to him and is like, "Congratulations, Milchik. You are the recipient of these wonderful adjusted portraits of the founder and his children. All these CEOs. Feel free to hang them around the office or put them up where you would like to." And he's like, he looks at it, and then he looks at her, and he's like, I forget what he says to her. He's something like, "Is this serious?" And then she doesn't say anything. She just
looks at him. Like,
she just looks at him, but with like this.
Do you want to? Yeah. Do you want to be accepted or not? Like that's the face, right?
But it's also she's smiling, but she's like also looks like she's about to cry. It's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm. It is fantastic.
Yeah.
There's Jesus Christ. Like we could talk about it. Like in order to accurately do this show justice, we would have to talk about it for hours, because the parallels, there's his brother-in-law on the outside is this fucking, everybody's like dog, like he's this goober, everybody dogs on him. He writes self-help books, but just like career revolutionaries, he doesn't have a job. He literally writes self-help books as his job, and one of these self-help books ends up on the inside, and it becomes like,
because that's the boss brings it in. Mm-hmm. She carries it in because the workers on the severed floor who are severed cannot bring anything from the outside other than the clothing that they wear. They have to put it all in a box, and then they go down to the severed floor. But she brings it in and leaves it on a table, and then Mark finds it. And he's never, of course, his Innie has never read anything that isn't work documentation. Mm-hmm. And so he reads this book and he's like, this is profound. This is an incredible.
Yes, it's this totally corny. It's this totally corny self-help book. But
like believe in yourself.
Yes, the passages that he reads are very pro-worker. Like they can be read that way, and so it mirrors like the way that theory is kind of nobody. It's very esoteric and kind of everybody dogs on it and blah 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 blah. But they need that in order to unite them inside, and they literally do unite them inside. His Audi hates his brother-in-law, but his innie is like looks at him as Lenin essentially. And so anyway, so there's this whole deal. They end up switching to the outside, like figuring out how to switch on their innie to the outside. And they find out that the girl who has been working there, Heliar, is actually the daughter of the CEO themselves, who opted to have the severed procedure in order to increase PR for the company itself. And so her innie hates herself. Yeah, and so this whole thing, and they get into this shit where their innies and outies hate each other, and it's wild. But
so Justin and Jeremy, could I ask because you've examined or at least kind of pointed to some of the the Marxist things that are clearly presented in this show. What are some of the pitfalls or limitations to the anti-capitalism, if there are any? There might not be, I guess, but are there any you can think of?
It's so obscure. Everything is so, it's a perfect analysis almost, but it's so weird that if you don't know it, you're never going to see it.
Right.
Okay.
That's the thing.
Too
is like,
coded.
a lot of people are like, it's not, I don't even know that
That's what I was going to say. What was that show that everyone hailed as like this anti-capitalist thing on Netflix, and it was a giant boy?
Oh, are you talking about
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids?
Boots Riley's Amazon show?
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
Yes. Oh, was it on Amazon?
Yes.
I think it was on, in the country we were living in at the time, we could watch it on Netflix.
Okay.
Because there's different licensing in different countries. I sometimes watch shows like this, and I completely understand how they get made. Because unless, like you said, unless you know what you're looking for, you don't really know what you're looking at. And like, I tried to watch that show, and I was like, am I stupid? What am I watching?
Boots Riley is an interesting figure.
Maybe I'm stupid.
Yeah. I mean,
and also like I might be stupid, right? Like I don't want to I know I'm the theory guy. Sucks for us, but
no. So I think
shows like this, I don't know that I'd watch them and be like, look at this Marxist analysis.
I think you would if you watch Severance, because it's very obvious if you've read
I would, because
Marx.
you guys have been telling me in the group chat for weeks.
And but if you look at what normies are saying about it, they're like, well, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? And they're like, it doesn't really make any sense because it doesn't really. And I'm like, because it doesn't have anything to do with the narrative. It has to do with explaining to you how alienation works and how false consciousness works. If you don't know
all
these
of her
things, if you
punishments are female labor things, so they're like
quite often,
putting stamps on Christmas cards for like 2 hours or 5 hours or some shit. Or
building a crib. There's some that aren't, like she goes to the dentist, and that's something
true.
else.
But a lot of them are.
A lot of them are like what are traditionally sort of women's work, so to speak, domestic labor.
And I don't know that they fail at a lot of capitalist stuff. I mean, there's like weird stuff like the guy, like the CEO founder guy, they have a big bust of his head that looks remarkably like the big bust of Lenin head that we have from the NKVD office. So there's stuff like that, but it's very subtle, and like that's really it. They don't try to push authoritarianism beyond the corporate authoritarianism. They focus very, very much on corporatism. But yeah, like I said, it is so weird that if you don't know this shit inside and out, you're just going to think it's this weird, funny show.
Interesting. So 3 different dystopias we've covered. The Hunger Games, where it's a world in which people have to give their children off to fight every year in a battle royale. We have Andor, a galactic space war fighting against fascist authority. Severance. We have the 9 to 5 dystopia. Are there any other kind of connections you guys want to make before we wrap this up? What are some of the let's say through lines that you've made?
The big connection with Severance is you cannot live a comfortable life on the backs of other people. and which is why the innies basically have to destroy their outies in order to fulfill themselves.
Ray, any concluding thoughts?
Ray's given us the shocker.
Jeremy.
No, I mean, I think, we've pretty much said it all. I think watch Severance for the theory.
We have said it all. This is the definitive.
This is it. We have finished. Yeah. Nobody needs to say anything else about anti-capitalist media. I guess the
ironic, because we have a part 2 coming.
It is right. We are going to do a second part. I guess my point that I was trying to make at the beginning is that there is that all of this stuff is still entertainment, no matter how good it is, and it will not bring about the revolution, even if it does sort of wake some people up to some degree. If you were in the Soviet Union and you watched Battleship Potemkin, you would then have lived in a society that reinforced the values which were demonstrated there. But Battleship Potemkin was popular in the West because it's very well made. Some of the camera work in that never been done before. Some very profound shots taken in that movie, but you would not have then gone out and been like, I'm a revolutionary after watching it, right? Even though it was made in the Soviet Union by a socialist, it does not change the fact that you are consuming entertainment. It is not a political program. You need a political program that underlies it for anything meaningful to change.
It will never be a source of revolution for anyone.
Right.
And it might inspire people to turn one way or the other, but that's so obscure and so rare.
Random.
It probably has a much better chance of venting those frustrations. I think a good parallel to draw would be the Canadian prime minister election, in that, it's this fucking lib trash douche nozzle. But because he vented Canadians' frustrations of Trump and America, people back him instead of focusing on the class struggle and revolution, right?
Literal banker.
And I think, I think that kind of sums up what happens when you create an appeal without a platform.
Well, on that note, that about does it for this episode. Thanks so much to all of our listeners and Patreon subscribers. The newest ones are Greg Z, Charles H, Alex F, Mama Said, Grammar Antifa, Tim K, Little Red Commie, Scott P, Sweezy S, Craig Bandicoot, and Jonathan A. And a very special shout out to our Vanguard patrons: Coop, Audie Gem, The Leninist Lawyer, B, Little Lumpenprol, Better Red Than Liberal, The Winking Cossack, Alex D, and, of course, Comrade Chihuahua. Once again, if you'd like to subscribe, you can do so at patreon.com/Prolespod for free. If you have questions, comments, or episode ideas, please email us at prolespod@outlook.com. Please follow, review, like, and do all that algorithm stuff. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. May the Spectre haunt your streets. In solidarity, forever.
Forever.